The Wyoming wind doesn't just blow. It carves. At the Iron Horizon long-range facility, a sprawling expanse of dust and sagebrush 3 hours north of Casper, the wind was currently a jagged blade coming off the Medicine Bow Mountains. Elena Vance arrived at 07:00 hours, exactly as she did every Wednesday. She drove a 2004 Ford F-150 with rusted wheel wells and a dent in the tailgate that looked like a kick from a mule. Elena didn't look like a master of anything. She wore a faded Carhartt jacket, worn-out denim, and a ball cap pulled low over eyes that seemed to be perpetually calculating the distance to the horizon. She carried a rifle case that had seen better decades. Inside wasn't a carbon fiber, neon-painted competition rig, but an old bolt-action Winchester Model 70, its wooden stock smoothed by years of contact with a cheek. To the casual observer, she was just another local ranch hand blowing off steam. But for Elena, the range wasn't a hobby. It was the only place where the noise in her head, the echoes of a life lived in the shadows of the Hindu Kush, and the jagged ridges of northern Iraq finally went silent. Here, the world was reduced to 3 variables: gravity, wind, and breath. In the precision of the shot, the ghosts of her past couldn't find her. By noon, the serenity of Iron Horizon was shattered. 3 black SUVs, polished to a mirror finish that had no business being in the desert, rolled into the gravel lot. Out stepped a group of young men in their early 20s, led by a man named Julian Vane. Julian was the embodiment of new money and old arrogance. He wore $800 tactical boots that had never touched mud and carried a custom shattering M20 interventional rifle that cost more than Elena's truck. And her ranch combined. "Check the glass on this, boys!" Julian shouted, his voice carrying over the whistling wind. "Schmidt and Bender Optics, if you can see it, you can kill it. Not like some of these locals shooting antique store relics." He tossed a smirk toward Elena, who was quietly setting up a spotting scope 2 benches down. She didn't look up. She was busy recording density, altitude, and humidity in a small, battered notebook. To Julian, her silence was submissiveness. To Elena, Julian was simply background noise, uncalibrated and irrelevant. The afternoon did not go well for Julian. Despite his $20,000 setup, he couldn't find the steel plates at 1,000 yards. The wind was gusting, switching from a 9 o'clock to a 3 o'clock direction with no warning. Julian grew red-faced, blaming his spotter, blaming the ammunition, and eventually blaming the range itself. Hank Miller, the owner of Iron Horizon, a man with skin like old leather and a prosthetic leg, watched from the porch of the pro shop. He'd seen 1,000 Julians pass through his range, but this one was particularly grating. "It ain't the tools, son," Hank called out, his voice a gravelly rasp. "It's the carpenter. You're pulling the trigger like you're trying to kill a snake with a shovel. Squeeze. Don't jerk." Julian spun around, his ego bruised. "The wind is uncallable, Hank. Nobody is hitting 1,000 yards today. Not in this crosscurrent." He gestured dismissively. "Help over there hasn't fired a shot in 20 minutes. She's probably scared she missed the mountain." The range went quiet. It was the kind of silence that precedes a lightning strike. Elena stood up slowly, her movements economical and fluid, like a predator waking from a nap. "The wind isn't uncallable," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of anger, which somehow made it more intimidating. "You're just looking at the flags. You aren't looking at the grass. The flags are at 12 feet. The bullet's arc is going to 60. You have to read the mirage at the apex, not the fabric on the pole." Julian laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Oh, we have an expert. Why don't you show us then? Put your money where your mouth is. Can you even hit the 1,000-yard plate with that museum piece?" Elena looked past him, her eyes scanning the distant, purple-hued ridges. 1,000 yards is a warm-up. If you want to see a real shot, there's an old water tank on the ridge at the 4,200-meter mark. It's a 2.5-mile flight. The group erupted in laughter. 4,000 meters, Julian wheezed. "That's a world record distance. You're delusional." Among the crowd was Dr. Arthur Sterling, a retired ballistics engineer and veteran who had been quietly watching from the sidelines. He stepped forward, intrigued. "I'll spot for her," he said. Elena nodded. She didn't use a ballistic calculator on a smartphone. She began to speak in a low cadence to Dr. Sterling, who adjusted his hypered spotting scope. "Coriolis effect is going to pull it right. Spin drift is heavy. We've got a thermal pocket over the ravine at the 2-mile mark. I'm going to hold 3 mils high and 2 mils left for the jump." The veterans in the crowd stopped breathing. They recognized the language. This wasn't a hobbyist talking. This was someone who had calculated the flight of lead across international borders. Elena adjusted a rifle. She didn't use a fancy tripod. She laid a sandbag on the bench and settled in. Her body became part of the earth. Elena took a breath, held half of it, and waited. She waited for nearly 3 minutes, feeling the rhythm of the wind on her skin. Then, the Winchester barked. It wasn't the deafening roar of Julian's Magnum. It was a sharp, disciplined crack. The bullet, a custom-loaded 300 Winchester Magnum, traveled for what felt like an eternity. 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 8. "Impact," Dr. Sterling whispered, his voice shaking. "Dead center." My God. She hit the valve housing. The silence that followed was absolute. Julian's face went from red to a ghostly, pale white. He looked at his $20,000 rifle, then at the woman in the dirty Carhartt jacket. His world, a world where Mani Boktalan had just collapsed. Elena didn't cheer. She didn't pump her fist. She simply cycled the bolt, caught the brass casing in her hand, and placed it in her pocket. As Elena packed her gear, the questions began. Who did you serve with? Where did you learn to read air like that? Was that a world record? Elena deflected every question with a polite, "Just practice," or "My father taught me," but she could feel the shift in the air. Her anonymity, her greatest armor, was cracking. Dr. Sterling looked at her with a mixture of respect and deep sorrow. He knew that kind of skill wasn't born in a peaceful place. It was forged in fire. "You're the Specter, aren't you?" Sterling whispered as she passed, a shadow out of the 5th Special Forces Group. "I heard stories about a woman in the Panjir Valley who could stop a convoy with a single round from 2 miles out." Elena didn't stop walking. "The Specter is dead, Doctor. I'm just a rancher now." The following Monday, the consequences of her display arrived. A black sedan, different from Julian's, pulled into the dirt driveway of the Vance Ranch. A man named Silas Kincaid stepped out. He was dressed in a shop suit that cost more than a herd of cattle, and he carried a briefcase like a weapon. "Miss Vance," Kincaid said, leaning against his car. "I represent Meridian Development. We've sent you 4 letters regarding the sale of this property. You haven't responded." "The answer is no," Elena said, wiping grease from a tractor part. Kincaid smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "You see, after your little performance at the range the other day, my employer, Mr. Marcus Bain, became very interested in you. It turns out you aren't just a stubborn landowner. You're a high-value asset with a very colorful, very classified history, a history that some people might find litigious." The threat was clear. By showing her skill, she had confirmed her identity. Marcus Van Julian's father wasn't just a developer. He was a man who collected power. He wanted her land for a luxury resort. But more than that, he wanted her out of the way because she was the only thing standing in the way of a billion-dollar pipeline. "We know about the Specter file," Kincaid continued. "We know about the mission in 2014 that went sideways. If you don't sign the deed, those files might just find their way to the press, or to the families of the men you couldn't save." Elena felt the old coldness creeping back into her veins. The range had been her refuge, but her ego, rather. Her need to defend the truth had opened the door to the very monster she had tried to leave behind. That night, Elena sat on her porch, the Winchester resting across her knees. The New Mexico twilight turned the sky the color of a bruise. She looked at the deed on the table, then at the horizon. She realized she had been trying to be 2 different people. The broken woman seeking peace, and the lethal soldier who knew how to survive. But they were the same person. You cannot bury the ghost. You can only decide who the ghost haunts. Kincaid and Vane thought they were dealing with a rancher they could bully. They didn't realize that they had just challenged a woman who could see a target from 2 miles away in a shifting wind. They had brought a briefcase to a gunfight. As she watched the headlights of a distant scout vehicle watching her house, Elena didn't feel fear. She felt a familiar, icy calibration. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the brass casing from the 4,200-meter shot, and set it on the table. The rancher was gone. The Specter was back. And she never missed. The story of Elena Vance teaches us a vital truth about the modern world. True mastery is quiet. Insecurity is loud. We often feel the need to prove ourselves to people who don't matter, using expensive toys or loud words to mask our lack of substance. But when we reveal our greatest strengths prematurely, we also reveal our location to our enemies. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We dive deep into the psychology of character and the power of the silent master every week. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their quiet work is seen. Until next time.